What's going on, guys? It's Steven from Making Multifamily Money, and today I want to share my lessons that I learned and the mistakes that I made while renovating 20 apartment complex units. For those of you who don't know, I own 46 apartment units in Oklahoma City, a 26 unit apartment complex, and a 20 unit apartment complex, and I actually started renovating both of them back in June of 2022, so about 5 months ago. So, kind of the first lesson that I learned was I bought my 26 unit about a year and a half ago, and it literally took a year to get renovations started due to the supply and labor shortage during COVID. So, my apartment complex, I didn't feel like much was happening because nothing was happening during that time. I was just waiting for my general contractor who was backed up on his last project, so there were significant delays, but fortunately, because the occupancy was very good in the 26 unit, when I bought it, 24 out of 26 were occupied. When I took over as the owner, I had to evict two, and two tenants left. So the vacancy increased to 6 units. So only 20 out of 26 units were, um, vacant, which was great at the time, right? Because in the ideal world, you just want to, renovate 1 to 2 units at a time. Once they're finished, at that point, you'd rent them out before resuming on or continuing with the other vacant units. But what I quickly learned and what I wanted to share was general contractors usually will batch units. So the fact that I had, I think, 6 vacant units, they're renovating all 6 units at the same time and they all finished at the same time, which, certainly it's nice, but in terms of like your cash flow, like I said, you want to finish two completely, rent them out, and then start the other, 2 units. But what the reality is, the general contractor hires subcontractors and they will do all units at the same time for economies of scale. So, for an example, when they bring in the kitchen guy, he will come in and rip out the kitchen for all 6 units and then install the new kitchen for all 6 units. When the countertop guy comes in, he will install countertops for all 6 units at the same time. When the paint guy comes in, he'll paint all the units at the same time. When the flooring guy comes in, he'll do all 6 units of flooring at the same time. So, I was hoping, like I said, to do 1 or 2, rent them out, and continue to get my cash flow. But the reality was, I had 6 units finished at the same time. And now that they're all finished, now my property manager is aggressively trying to rent them out. And we were able to rent out, the 6 units pretty fast because Oklahoma is a pretty decent market with high rental demand, and our units are C class, and we renovated them to look like A class, but they're maybe at a B class pricing. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. But that's the first lesson that I learned. The second lesson that I learned from my 20 unit apartment complex is, initially I wanted to renovate 5 units. 1 unit was completely burned out, which I knew about going into it during my inspection. And the other 4 units didn't need too much, just your typical apartment turn, but it needed, new flooring. And I wanted to paint the whole exterior. But what I learned was the contractor quoted me. He said, "Oh, I can finish this in 10 weeks." Right. And knowing from my experience and what I've learned is, the general contractor always underquotes how long it will take and how much it will cost, because when you start to rip out drywall and the kitchen and the bathroom, you start to uncover other issues that happen and they need to fix that, which costs more money. So I always recommend, anticipate 25% more of what you're quoted, and it's going to take longer to fix all of that. So 25% more time at least. So for me, this was a hard money loan that I have, which is good for 1 year. So I have basically 12 months to finish my renovation project. He quoted me, 10 to 12 weeks, which is about 3 months. And I just said out the gate, how if I gave you 6 months, could you finish the job? And initially, he looked at me like I was crazy and like shocked that I basically gave him twice as much time as what he quoted me, because I know things happen, right? There's a lot of delays. that happened with the burned out unit. We need to get permits, so that caused delays as well. And he just said, "Yeah, I can definitely do it in 6 months if he gave me that, but I think it'll take me three." So, renovation started back in May of this year, and fast forward 6 months later, he just finished the burned out unit, and all the other units are ready to go. So, my prediction was correct. So, you always want to, build in some cushion that it's going to take a little bit longer than expected. And even at 6 months, I still have another 6 months on my hard money loan. There's a possibility to extend another 3 months if needed at no extra cost. So this is great for me, right? Because now that I have that cushion, now my objective is to rent out these units um, to get the property stabilized so that I can get permanent financing and execute a cash out refi to pay off the hard money loan, get back my down payment, get back some renovation costs, and hopefully take out a little bit extra money as well, all tax free to pump into the next apartment complex. Um, the next lesson that I learned, number three, which is the one that kind of hit me the hardest, I'd say, and it was definitely a miscommunication on my end. And so, what happened for my 20 unit was, so when I took over the property, there were five vacant units. Um, I had to evict about two tenants. So now there were seven. Um, Three tenants left due to bed bugs. So now it's 10 vacant. And then I guess three more tenants just left just because, they knew maybe rents were going to go up or they just had that fear. So they wanted to secure something else. Right. So I had 13 vacant units. And, for me, I just assumed the property manager knew that I only wanted to rent it or renovate the five initial units that I initially quoted on. And that any other unit that wasn't listed was going to just be, the typical turn. So, to typically turn a unit, just some paint, some touch up here and there, clean it, and then basically just rent it out, right? It won't get as high of a rent compared to the renovated units, but that's fine, right? You want a good mix of premium units, which are renovated, and the more cost effective units so that you can hit, a wider price range and offer more options to basically fill up the apartment complex, right? Because I just want to rent it out and execute my cash out refinance. But where the mistake happened was my property manager assumed that I want to renovate all the units. So I assumed that she knew that I only want to renovate five units, and she assumed that I want to renovate all the units. So as a result, all the units were just left sitting there. And when I finished renovating, all five of my units that I plan to renovate, I reached out to the property manager and said, "Hey, so how's the property going?" And she said that, "Oh, yeah, I mean, it's only seven tenants are left. And yeah, we're ready to renovate the next, 7 to 8 units." And I just said, "What?" I thought that those were being turned and rented out immediately. So now I'm stuck with 13 units that I basically need to rent out. So now, the cash flow, fortunately with seven tenants, it does cover the hard money loan of around $2,000 and the insurance, which is $1,000. I'm collecting around $3,000 a month, but all the utilities and the water, the gas, electricity, that's all my cost now. And that's how I'm negative. So, once again, it was a miscommunication on my part. So, what I would do moving forward is communicate clearly that I only want to renovate these five units, to rent them out the higher rent. Whatever unit that comes vacant as a result of people leaving or evicting, let's just do a make ready and get those rented out, because those other units honestly were not as bad. I renovated the five worst units. The other units were pretty decent as is. Obviously they can use some touch up here and there. But like I was only expecting to rent out like maybe 5 to 7 units, but now I have to rent out 13 units. So now the property manager is going on a huge renting spree, and like I said, it's unfortunate and it sucks. But in the grand scheme of things, I'm planning on buying hold this property, so it won't really matter for me. But I just kind of want to share this for everyone to learn. And the number four thing that I learned, specifically with hard money lenders who give you renovation cost, is when you first buy the property, you have to complete a scope of work, right? And you're under the time crunch with the hard money loan because typically it closes in 30 days. I sent out my general contractor. He basically gave me quotes on what he thought needed to be fixed, and gave me the best scope of work that he could at the time. But unfortunately, with renovation, what you plan initially and what actually happens vary significantly, right? Because once you start ripping out walls, you find other issues. There might have been typos. They might have underquoted because the contractor's going in real fast, right? He's just going in, doing a quick glance and giving you a general quote. But the issue where I fell into was the lender followed the scope of work like a Bible. So if it literally wasn't listed on the scope of work, I would not get reimbursed for what I did, right? So let's just say, um, for I need new flooring for a unit, and I just said I need $3,000 for the flooring, but let's just say it costed me $5,000 for the flooring. The lender would only give me three out of the $5,000, right? Which was on the original scope of work, not what actually happened. And then another mistake that happened was we identified the wrong unit by accident on the scope of work. So we thought we were going to renovate unit one, but it was actually unit 10. So, and on the original scope of work, we had all this work listed for unit number one, but it's unit 10 that needed renovation. So when I renovate unit 10, I don't get any reimbursement because they follow unit one as the scope of work. So what I kind of assumed was like, hey, I have $100,000 from the lender, the hard money lender, and from there, I can use it how I want and basically just prove what work I've done, and then they'll reimburse me. But what I quickly learned, and it's honestly my fault, was they based their ARV off the scope of work. Um, so, and that's what was approved by the loan committee when they approve your loan. So you have to follow that like a Bible. But it's just super inconvenient for me, right? Because I just want to renovate this, do a cash out refi, pay them out, and then move on, right? That's my objective. So, overall, what I kind of learned about this is, obviously spend a lot more time with your original scope of work, but at the end of the day, there's going to be things that you cannot predict for and that the lender will not reimburse you for. So, number one, if you assume that you're going to need $100,000 for renovation, make sure you have some of that in reserves yourself. Don't depend on the lender. If they can give you $100,000 back after inspections, great, perfect for you. But if they can only give you 50,000 out of the 100,000, do you have $50,000 in reserves to cover that? Right. So, fortunately for me, I did have that reserves, but I was just slightly disappointed that they're that strict. Like literally, they've lent money to so many construction projects, and how many times has the scope of work that you sent before you started tearing down walls was actually accurate, right? So there needs to be some flexibility on their end. And I told the hard money lender and the inspector, I said, hey, like, send your inspector. I'm gonna have my general contractor meet you and walk you through exactly what he did and how much it cost, and I'll give you all that cost. And then from there, just reimburse me what you can based off the original scope of work, right? And to me, I'm just like, um, they're just being very difficult to work with. Like the hard money lender was just like, we need to inspect all 20 units, and I just said, why? I only renovated 5 units. Like that's where the work and the money went. Why do you need to look at the other 15 units when nothing was done? Nothing's going to change, right? So it's just kind of these growing pains I'm going through. Working with this hard money lender, and it just comes with experience, right? So, it's another lesson that I learned. Like, I typically just funded all the renovations myself, so I never had to go through the pain of this. But I think moving forward, when I work with a hard money lender, I would ask them, hey, like, I gave you this scope of work. This is the best estimation that we have. But if we have unexpected things that happen or slight mistakes, what's the process in changing that scope of work? Like, I think moving forward, I would vet that process of a hard money lender a lot sooner, because if they just gave me $100,000, obviously I keep them in the loop at what I'm doing and have my general contractor available. But I would just make it known or ask up front to say, what's going to happen if my original scope of work and what I'm actually doing vary? Like, what does that process look like in terms of me getting reimbursed? because that's all I really care about, right? So, like once again, another lesson that I'm gonna take forward with me moving forward. So, and hopefully partnering with a good hard money lender that knows how I do business and that they have trust of me, so that they can give me a little more flexibility compared to following the scope of work like a Bible, right? So overall, the to kind of summarize, the kind of four lessons that I learned was number one, things are going to take a lot longer than what the general contractor quotes. Always add in at least 25% more time and 25% more in terms of cost. Number two is that general contractors will usually batch units. They'll usually finish 4 to 5 units at the same time. At that point, you'll rent them out. Number three is don't assume that the property manager is going to rent out the units that you aren't going to renovate. You have to make it very clear which units you're going to renovate and that you have no intention of renovating any other unit, or else they're going to leave those units vacant waiting for the renovations. And number four is uh, vetting the scope of work with as best as possible, but also asking the hard money lender what the process is when it varies from what actually needs to be done, because that definitely will be the case. So overall, hope you found this video valuable. If so, please like, comment, and subscribe if you have any questions. And I hope to see you in the next one. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.